Hi there, Isha here, and welcome to The Higher Life, where I take concepts that are considered spiritual, esoteric, psychological, and new age, and unpack how you can apply these as really practical tools to empower your life. That is, to live from a place of personal power and no longer be living in a reactive state to the conditions of your life. And from the work that I've been doing over the last 18 years as a transformational life coach, I believe that this is actually the collective calling of all humanity right now. And if you look out in the world, at least if you are operating in the same circles that I have been, which is with a focus on spiritual well-being, personal empowerment, optimal relationships, anywhere where it asks us as human beings to reconsider our own power in the world, to create better results, not only for ourselves as a species, but for all of life and for the whole universe. Now, this is a little bit of a dilemma because even in saying that, I can hear that there's this assumption that human beings essentially have power over what happens in a universal context. And I guess this stems from this idea that, at least in our collective and personal experience right now, it does feel like humanity is self-sabotaging. That is, we are really sabotaging our natural environment, and we're sabotaging our internal environment, that is our energy systems, to serve some kind of reality that we instinctively know isn't really working out for us very well. Yes, we've seen some positive outcomes to what is known as the progress mindset, the evolution of the human mind, and how it's played out in the last 100 to 150 years, that there has been a significant advancement in the quality of our experience, at least on a material level. However, if we consider our emotional, our spiritual, and our psychic lives, which we really do need to do, it isn't looking quite so rosy. And even if we do a very harsh evaluation of our material world, I think it's obvious that we haven't really nailed it. There is a very small part of the population that is indeed enjoying a much higher quality of life. However, there is a significant part of the human population and of the natural world that is still suffering, or is actually suffering as a result of these advancements. And that is so key, because in today's episode, I want to talk about what is our shadow. Now, the shadow or the shadow self is something that is talked about a lot, I believe, mainly in spiritual or new age circles, but most definitely it is being picked up in psychology as a reference term that we use more leisurely, whereas in the past probably it was part of the academic vocabulary in psychology. I mean, absolutely, shadow work is the work of Jung, or at least conceptualized through Jung. So in the world of psychology and psychiatric intelligence, the shadow is a well-known player. However, it's very hard to understand exactly what this shadow self is, because it often gets kind of hijacked into this rhetoric about our ego or our bad self, or these parts of us that we don't want to look at, and that makes them somehow bad in our lives, or evil, or the devil. I mean, I think it doesn't take much to understand that when we use the term shadow, most people think we are referring to a part of themselves that is ugly, or that they don't want to look up to, or creates havoc. And I want to work with the shadow differently in today's lesson, because what we do here is take concepts and unpack them from a personal empowerment perspective, but really from a larger vision that in empowering ourselves, we actually are going to transform the collective experience of being human. And what that would look like is a very different material reality in which we are all thriving as a species, and we are not spending our lives basically misusing our creative energy to serve some kind of performance mindset that has really taken hold. And in this mindset, the belief is that our purpose as human beings is to constantly excel, is to constantly improve on the past. It's to constantly advance and better ourselves. And that isn't of itself a shadow pattern, because it's relentless and it has us using our energy incorrectly. So if we put it down to a really basic idea, The shadow really speaks to the ways in which we operate that misuse our energy or use our energy incorrectly. So if we look at the material world and we see that a lot of our environmental degradation comes from an abuse of energy. And I mean, it's symbolic, metaphoric, but also very practical. The way that we use fuel, for example, to power factories that create products that are just simply more of the same product, but in competition with each other, is a waste of our energy. There's only so many boxes of cornflakes you need, and you absolutely do not need 5 different varieties of cornflakes to choose from. So even in looking at something as basic as this, we can see that that would be a huge misuse of our energy. Using fuel, burning fuel in factories and in any way, shape or form in which we are creating products that have no real use to society, to the collective, to the greater planet. And I mean, that is a lot of stuff that we are out there creating, using fuel to create. So we're in this really dysfunctional way of operating. Now you might ask, what does that have to do with shadow work? Well, what I want to propose is that the shadow simply refers to aspects of ourself that are unknown to us but still play out in our lives, and therefore they kind of hijack our energy and we're not even really aware of it. However, the shadow can be something that is actually positive in our lives. So something that we may perceive as a flaw also can be perceived as a strength, but they are both in the shadow, which is we don't really have the awareness to understand how these patterns are actually playing out, and therefore we're not in charge of them. That is, they actually operate through us rather than us mastering them. So when I do a lot of work with clients as a transformational life coach, I often take them into an area of archetypes, which is something I've discussed many times in these lessons, and it's definitely something I walk you through in the foundation course, Awaken the Genius Within. And the reason why I have my clients identify the archetypal patterns is because what becomes very evident is that when you're a child growing up in an environment, you actually instinctively call on these archetypal tendencies to navigate your childhood, especially if you're in an environment where you're quite stressed or you're feeling under-resourced. You will notice that you will revert into particular patterns of behavior or thinking or beliefs that will help you navigate that situation as successfully as you can. So for example, if you grow up in a home where there's a lot of emotional neglect, that is, your emotional needs are not getting met and the people around you don't seem available to that. If you're a natural carer like I am, you might have the archetype of the mother or one of those carer archetypes. You may naturally revert into becoming a carer or a pleaser for the people around you in order to get your emotional needs met. Now, in this instance, the attributes of the carer, such as being nurturing, being warm, being compassionate or empathetic, are actually beautiful inner qualities and resourcefulnesses that we want to be able to access. It is a resourcefulness that is powerful in our lives. So in this way, you wouldn't say that is a shadow self in the old way of saying that is a bad part of me. However, when you instinctively call on your capacity for nurturing or for empathy to serve a dysfunctional relationship, you can see how it is actually becoming applied in a way that is not healthy for you, for the other person, and therefore for the relationship. So it is really important when you're doing shadow work not to condemn the self that is actually operating in this way, but to come to understand that in that particular context, at that particular time, at the level of maturity that you were at, that was the best that you could do, was to call on an innate talent or gift that you have, a latent gift or one that you are not aware of, to actually help you navigate that really complex situation of having the need for emotional nurturance, not getting it, and then thinking about how can you call upon your strengths to actually make that happen. Now, the thing is that operating as a carer or a pleaser in intimate relationships or in a family environment actually probably does help some of those needs get met. You do have a sense of intimacy. You probably feel that you're needed in some sort of way. You probably get a little bit of positive reinforcement from the people that you are looking for that positive reinforcement from. So it kind of works in a really half-hearted way or a limited way. And that, in a way plays out into really extreme situations that we hear about all the time of children who've grown up in highly abusive situations but still bond with their parents. And we've seen that in a Stockholm Syndrome sort of way, where the capacity to adapt to really tough conditions and still try to find some sort of love through them, or acceptance, or to have that core need to be seen or to be heard or to be valued or appreciated, can play out in the most bizarre and toxic situations. So it's such a powerful adaptation skill that we have as human beings, to adapt into almost any set of conditions and use our latent or innate genius to try and extract what we need from that situation. Now, you'll notice that I often refer back to childhood, and that is because this is when these patterns actually start to be conditioned in a really dysfunctional way. So if you were born into a completely perfect situation, in the sense of there was no falsehood or not false conditioning going on, and you were just allowed to be free and let your genius manifest on its own, then you would not need to be doing this work. Essentially, you would grow up into being a beautiful human being, in the sense that you know your own beauty and you can express it in a really easy way, and you don't have any need for another person or a relationship to fulfill you. Because when you're a child and you grow up in an environment, a family environment, you're conditioned from a very early age to believe that your family is the source of your well-being. And that really is only true in a practical sense. They do need to provide a certain amount of safety, security, and emotional nurturance for you to kind of be able to grow up into a relatively functional human being. And when you don't have those basic needs met, it is hard to actually operate as a functional, mature adult. And we see it every day in what I term the adult child, of which I was one for many years, where you are operating out of dysfunctional childhood beliefs of not being good enough, not being worthy, feeling that the only value you have is when you perform or please, through these dysfunctional patterns which are just out to get you your little bit of fuel, your little bit of recognition, your little bit of power, scraping away in this half-hearted way. And if we look out at the world today, that's actually what we see. Even the most successful people, it's this really half-hearted version of success in which, yes, you might be individually doing well, but it's not a shared experience, and that makes it limited. And we are all out there hustling and bustling and using our creative energy to try and just get through the next day or the next year or plan for retirement. And it's pretty exhausting and it's relentless, because unless you're really, really cashed up, and even if you are, the fear of not being okay is always nipping at your heels. And if you are doing well materially, then it's the fear of not being emotionally stable or mentally stable, or functioning in the way that life thinks you should be functioning. And when I say life, I mean the collective mindset that we are all being driven by at the moment, that says that our purpose is to achieve and to perform and to succeed and to fulfill our highest potential, and referring to that as a gift that is actually a skill, a talent that manifests in doing something, a doer. Whereas when we really take a hard look at the highest potential of human beings, it is very much coming from a place of being transformed from the inside out, and really operating as this genuinely compassionate, peaceful, healthy, abundant human being, in which the material world is no longer an indicator of your success, and you in fact can operate as your highest self from these highest qualities, no matter what is going on in your life. We could refer to this as a certain sort of majesty, to rise above the conditions of your life and to be fully in charge in how you manifest into the world and how you interact with others, your relational style. So it's such a beautiful path to be on, to really consider this shadow work as exploring the patterns that drive your life, that aren't really serving your highest potential, that is allowing you to live with confidence, with ease, with effortlessness, and to use your energy correctly, to pull out of this performance mindset and to really start to live in the compassionate mindset, in the peace mindset, in the everything is okay mindset, to be really at ease in yourself and able to give with your whole heart without being concerned about what you're getting back, what your life looks like, what you don't have, what you do have in comparison to other people. This very hectic experience we're having right now of being a human being that is very individualistic focused in the sense of it's all about my own security, or my family's security, or my tribe's security. We haven't quite transformed out of that, but we are heading in that direction, and we are preparing the soil for the new emergence of a transformed human being that happens through a transformed mindset, the compassionate mindset. So when we transform the way we perceive our purpose, we actually create a kind of energy transformation in our system where we are no longer driven by fear and very much driven by curiosity. Now, I love to look at the shadow in the work through the work of the Gene Keys. I think Richard Rudd's work, where he talks about a particular archetypal energy pattern that is what it is, but it has a shadow and a gift experience of it, and they are one and the same thing. So in a way, shadow and gift really speaks to duality, that if something is a demon in you, it's also going to be your greatest strength. But that's kind of confusing, right? If my need to please is burning me out, then it's also my capacity to care and to love and to empathize that is my greatest strength. So in exploring the potentially negative aspects of how that pattern plays out, I can also explore the beautiful qualities that play out that are really strengthening. But we can get caught in that cycle for the rest of our lives, constantly trying to transform the negative into the positive, or hide in the positive to escape the negative. So the real transformation happens when we can leave that whole pleasure, pain, good, bad, shadow or where it plays out in a negative way and where it becomes a strength. We want to kind of leave that whole reality behind and really step into the essence of that gift itself. So, what is at the core of caring? I think we say it always comes back to a version of love, but love has its own flavors. So for some people, loving is all about empathy. For others, it's compassion. For others, it's playfulness. There's all these different ways that love expresses itself, and that becomes kind of archetypal patterns of the human experience. And then within that, it can be used in a way that is of disservice to you as a human being or in service of you as a human being. But even in this narrow context, we can get very caught up when spending our lives looking for shadows and trying to transform them into strengths. And that kind of, we get locked into that cycle, and it feels like it's never ending because there's always layers of shadow and strength in the one quality. So what we want to be doing is stepping fully into that quality and integrating the fact that it can play out in all these different ways, and to no longer be focused on controlling how we are at that level of reality. We really want to step into the essence nature aspect of ourself, in which these archetypal patterns are kind of a perfume. They're kind of a auric experience rather than something that our mind starts to get caught up in. And I think really when we do get into this shadow work, the mind does tend to get a little bit antsy and want to kind of get rid of the shadow, or to kind of really hone in on all our behavior to try and work out what that bad behavior is, or that negative behavior, or that shadow behavior. And then we get really down on the ego and we say the shadow is the ego, but it's not. The ego is just the socially conditioned self, the self that operates out in the material world, the actor, one could say. And the actor can work with anything you give it. It can work with the shadow aspect of your archetype. It can work with the strength aspect of your archetype. But in the end of the day, the actor just wants to express the essence nature of who you are. It wants to be free to just go out and spontaneously express itself and no longer be caught up in some sort of self-investigation where you have to eradicate parts of yourself and develop other parts of yourself. So shadow work in the context of personal transformation is actually understanding and working out how patterns operate in humanity as a larger force, and no longer being driven by these patterns in your life, and coming to understand the pure power of these patterns, and then opening yourself up or removing any barriers or fears you have to being exposed, and letting that essence nature shine out of you. And that's what we do through our foundation course, Awaken the Genius Within. Even though we do explore in a more investigative way, what are my top strengths, what's my archetypal profile, we are going in and using the mind to really map out our sense of selves. It is in service of really coming into that essence nature self, but you kind of have to know all the layers of self that are covering it up. Or at least you can choose to know all the layers of self that are getting in the way of that essence nature really shining at its brightest, because then you kind of truly know yourself. However, I still think the non-dualists have a point that you can also just cut through all of that and remember that your essence nature is just pure energy that has a flavor to it, and that you can tap into or return to that pure state at any time, in any moment, no matter what's going on. You don't have to dig through all these layers of self, because in some ways you can get caught up in reinforcing them along the way and get attached to one of them that kind of makes you feel good, a bit like a drug, and then live your life through that lens. And we see that all over the internet now, of human beings that have tapped into a particular talent or gift that they have, and they've just kind of started to really focus on manifesting through that particular identity, and perhaps getting stuck there and not realizing that that's just one step along the way, and that we don't need to be out there in the world selling our talents to other people and engaging them in our story. And we don't even need to be having conferences all the time to talk about how things should be or could be. We actually kind of need to get out there and step in and dive into that essence nature and live through it, and things will happen naturally. We don't need to talk about it anymore. We kind of need to do the work and embody or allow our essence nature to become the core driver in our life, the principal actor. So if this sounds exciting to you, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I slip in and out of feeling very aligned and very at one and at peace in myself, no matter what's going on, to being highly, to being completely caught up in the trance of this duality of, oh my gosh, I'm not doing well, I need to do better, or oh my gosh, I'm doing well over there, I need to give more of my time to that, and just feeling like I'm bouncing off the walls most mornings about where to put my energy, how to use it, what's valuable, what's not valuable. It's so exhausting. But I sense there's a way out, and the way out is challenging the fact that that reality is the only reality, and that we just need to, that we should just go to school and perform, and go to work and perform, and have families and perform, and we should all be performing to each other and saving the world. And just imagine what it would be like if we got up every morning and the only thing we really needed to do or wanted to do was to be really at one with whatever it is that we're doing, and be with other like-minded people, and share love and share laughter and share drama, and just be in the world together, exploring it together, curious together, much like kids in a playground before they before the adult world takes over or the performance world takes over. They're just out there going with whatever shows up, completely unaware of who they're supposed to be in that experience. So they're just being whoever they are in that experience. It's wonderful. It's improvisation lived as reality. How beautiful is it to just simply be allowed to improvise and get out there and know who you are in every moment of your life without ever having to get fixed in that identity. It's such a powerful place to be. So if you're interested, absolutely check out the Higher Life Academy. We are just setting up the course, the foundation course, Awaken the Genius Within, and this is where you get to deep dive into this work and come out the other end feeling confident, at ease, and really in a place of genuine self-love. So until next time, take care and love life.